It was a chilly Tuesday morning, the kind of day where the cold seeps through your coat, no matter how thick it is. I was standing in line at the bank, waiting to deposit a check, when the door opened, letting in a blast of icy air. Everyone turned to see who had entered. He walked in slowly, his clothes worn and layered, his boots scuffed from years of hard use. His face was rugged, with lines that spoke of struggles and stories untold. A large, tattered backpack hung over his shoulder. You could tell he was homeless, and from the way he moved, hesitant, almost apologetic, you could tell he wasn't used to being in places like this. The other customers glanced at him briefly, then went back to their phones or conversations, but I kept watching. Something about him caught my attention. Maybe it was the American flag patch stitched to his jacket. Maybe it was the way he clutched a small envelope in his hand, as if it were his last hope. He approached the counter slowly, and the young teller behind the glass looked nervous. "Can I help you?" she asked cautiously. I need to cash this," he said, his voice low but steady. He slid the envelope through the slot. The teller opened it, revealing a government-issued check. It wasn't much, just a few $100s, but to him, it probably meant everything. "I'll need ID," the teller said, her tone professional but distant. The man hesitated. "I don't have any. It got stolen, along with most of my things." Her expression hardened. "I'm sorry, sir, but without identification, I can't cash this." The man's shoulders sagged and he nodded as if he'd expected this answer. He reached out to take the envelope back, but before he could, a voice called out, "Wait." Everyone turned to see the bank manager, a middle-aged woman with sharp features softened by a warm smile. She stepped out from behind her desk and walked toward the man. "Sir, could you please come with me?" she said gently. The man looked wary but followed her to a small office in the corner. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I could see her speaking to him with kindness and focus, her hands clasped in front of her. He gestured to the check, his face a mixture of hope and doubt. After a few minutes, they both stood up. The manager walked out of the office, signaling to the teller. "Please cash this check for him," she said firmly. The teller looked surprised but nodded. The man's eyes widened and he stammered, But I don't have ID. How?" The manager smiled. "I believe you," she said simply. "And I recognize the VA check. I know it's legitimate." The man's voice cracked as he said, thank you so much." But she wasn't done. "Do you have a place to stay tonight?" she asked. He shook his head, his face clouded with shame. "Not really, just wherever I can find." The manager nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Give me a moment." She disappeared into her office again and came back with a business card and a piece of paper. "This is the address of a shelter that works with veterans," she said, handing him the card. "And this," she handed him the paper, "is a personal note from me. Show it to them, and they'll make sure you get a warm bed and a hot meal tonight." The man looked at the card, then at her, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Tears welled up in his eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," he whispered. "You don't need to," she replied. "You've already done enough for this country. It's the least we can do for you." As he walked out of the bank, holding his small check and the papers like they were treasures, everyone in the room seemed to breathe a little differently. The cold air outside felt less biting, and the weight of the world seemed just a little lighter. That day I saw more than just a kind act. I saw humanity, real, raw, and beautiful. And I realized that sometimes all it takes is one person to remind us of the good we're all capable of.